After the short summer break, the men of Maranello have returned to work with a double header coming up on the championship calendar, with races on the next 2 consecutive weekends at Spa and Monza Park, the last 2 races of the Formula One World Championship to take place in Europe. Luca Marmorini, head of engines and electronics, explains how Scuderia Ferrari is preparing for these races, as well as looking back at the recently completed first half of the season, and to the projects that are on the go for the future. Work now starts again after a 2-week break. Are you ready and refreshed? Can you really rest your mind in 2 weeks?
Oh, surely 2 weeks have been great for recharging our batteries. 2 weeks are not a long time, but surely it's due to the fact that with this break, all the Formula One activities stopped. There are really 2 intense weeks where we can dedicate time to our family. If this time is good enough for refreshing, completing our minds, it's difficult. We don't want to lose concentration, so our mind is always preparing ourselves for the next challenge to come. And also sometimes in relaxing environment, far from daily routine job, good ideas can come as well.
We go straight into 2 races that are very tough on the engines, with Spa followed by Monza. How does one tackle such a punishing schedule?
Spa and Monza are 2 very challenging tracks for powertrain. 2 where the important engine power is higher in terms of lap time. We have not a lot of freedom to modify engine to increase power, but still we can work on fuel and lubricants, for example. We can work intensively on decreasing performance degradation through the engine life. Monza is a very quick track. The wide open throttle percentage is the highest in all the championship. So this is a very challenging chance for engine to show how good it is.
From a purely engine point of view, how would you assess the first part of the season?
Well, that's quite difficult to make a judgment of the first part of the season. I would say we are in target at the moment. We are fully focused on the second part of the season. It's very important for us to confirm the good work we have done so far. From an engine point of view, we are in target in terms of reliability and performance, but also we are quite happy about the result we got so far from the electronic side and the cares. We didn't stop the three teams where we put our powertrain at the moment.
And on the electronics and cares front?
We are reasonably happy as well on cares and electronics. On cares side, we did not redesign the system. It's an evolution of 2011 system, but we made it smaller, lighter, with a better distribution of volumes to let our colleagues on the chassis side to decide a better car. We work also to improve efficiency of the system, but we always try to keep development costs very low to be able to offer a cheap supply to our customers.
Despite all the limitations imposed by the regulations, what can be done in terms of development?
We can't work directly on performance. We are not allowed to make any change on the engine to have more power. As I told you before, we can work on fuel and lubricants, and this is very good to have a historic partner like Shell working with us. On the other side, every time there is a new car, the installation part of the engine itself is very important, because the easier the engine is installed in the car, the better the car can be. We also work a lot on exhaust pipes development. The exhaust at the moment design is based on a compromise between aero performance and engine performance as well, and this is good. We have worked very well with our colleagues from the aero point of view. We also have worked a little bit on engine mapping. Though the limitation at the moment is quite strict from a regulation point of view, there is still some performance that is possible to be gained working on this.
At Spa, as indeed in Interlagos, one races at high altitude, which is not commonly experienced in motor racing. Does this factor have an influence on engine behavior?
So low barometric pressure high humidity and high temperature, these are not good parameters to have a performance. If you, for example, compare an engine racing in Interlagos with a lot of humidity, low barometric pressure, with an engine running at the beginning of the season in Barcelona during testing, you may have more than 50 horsepower difference, and this is physics, we cannot do anything on this. Rather than this, I'm quite worried in Spa because the weather is so easily changeable during the day, then sometimes it's more important to select the right strategy to handle the car rather than the engine itself.
It's not just the 2012 program on the agenda, as the forthcoming V6 adventure is getting close enough to touch. Where exactly are we with this project? Are you happy with the way things are going?
This is a very challenging period for powertrain people. We are working on the 2012 powertrain, and the rest of the season is very important. No one mentioned that we have to work also on 2013 engine with a new installation that is a big work. In the same time, we have the V6, the first prototype of V6 running on the dyno, and this is a very interesting project. 2014 regulation is extremely challenging, completely new Formula One powertrain regulation, mostly focused on energy recovery, and there is indeed an area where Ferrari wants to invest. It is interesting on. Our V6 is running at the moment and we are learning a lot of things. It's a turbo engine, a different turbo because it implies energy recovery also from the turbo compressor, and we are really focused on this and we are looking forward to interpret the rules in the right way.
It's been a long time since the only three functions that could be controlled from the steering wheel of the car were the radio to talk to the pits, the drink supply button and the switch to select neutral. In the section that looks into the workings of the car, Andrea Beneventi, Head of Electronics Management, explains the 29 functions controlled by switches and buttons of the 2012 steering wheel.
This is Fernando Alonso's steering wheel used on the 2012 car, and as you know, the steering wheel is the interface between the driver and the car, and it's used to manage all the system, electronic systems that are on the car. In particular, by the steering wheel, the drivers manage the engine, the gearbox, and also some particular behavior of the chassis. So, going through what we call the switches and rotary switches, we can see that some switches are used to manage the engine, like we see the torque manettino, we call manettino in Italy, and the torque rotary switch that is used to change the engine map. So in order to manage various situations during the race, like poor grip or better grip, or start. The rev manettino is used to manage the engine maximum RPM, which is the RPM are fixed at their maximum level by rule at 18,000. But in certain situations it is better to lower the engine RPM because of engine safety or engine reliability reasons. The mix manettino, which is used to manage the engine mapping and is used to lean or to enrich the fuel mixture. On the front window we can also see some switches used to manage the curse, the energy recovery system, which is in particular we have the boost manettino. We manage by means of this, by means of which the driver manages how much torque the curse has to deliver, the charge manettino, which is the switches by means of which the driver manages how much the batteries of the cars are recharged under braking. This is in a very comfortable position to be moved because it affects the handling of the car during braking. Then we have also some other switches that are used to for the management of they are used for the management of the gearbox, like neutral button. When the car is in first gear, by pressing the neutral button it goes into neutral, and obviously the two main gear shift switches, which are one for going up on gear shift and going down. The main one, which is in the center of the steering wheel, is used like a mobile menu. So you have many functionalities, and you select the function you want to change, and then by means of these two buttons you change the value of this function you want to have, and then by OK you confirm the value you selected. And then there's another manettino, which is GRP, which is used to change the clutch bite point in order to make an easier management of the clutch leaving the garage or during the start. Then there are other switches used to in particular situation during the race, like a wet condition start, where the driver by means of this is like moving many switches, and it makes the life of the driver easier. Then we have other buttons like OV, which is used to manage the RPM during particular situation. Maybe you want to have lower RPM in certain for many laps, but then when during an overtake you want to have full speed. Then there's the radio button, which is the press to talk, the PTT, to talk with the garage. Drink bottle enable a pump that gives the driver the physiologic drink. And then there are buttons like RF that manages the rear flap, which is the rear flap can be lifted up in order to reduce the drag during an overtake, and this is allowed only if you are within 1 second from the car in front, to the car in front. Then on the front we have also a display with lights. In particular, the top LEDs are used to indicate the engine revs, RPM, and gives the driver an indication of when to call a gear shift. Then there are lights that are managed by the race control and are reproducing the flags yellow, blue and red, in order to be sure, and these lights are switched on by the race control, communicating with the car, and are used to be sure that the driver has seen the lights. Then we have two clutch levers with the same functionality, and there is one left and one right because each driver manages the one that he is more comfortable with. As we said, the steering wheel is the interface between the car and the driver, and therefore ergonomically and in terms of functionality, each driver has a different steering wheel. So all the buttons can be programmed according to driver's feeling, and also the grip is made on driver's hand.
completing the first edition of the Formula One alphabet. With help from Scuderia Ferrari technicians, today we look at the meaning of camber, setup and weight distribution.
Camber refers to the wheel geometry that you have on the front and rear wheels, and it's the angle, the vertical angle from the floor. We put more camber, classically, to have more lateral cornering force on the tyre. So if, for example, you have turning understeer, where the car doesn't turn as sharply as you want, you can add more front camber, so more negative camber, which means more inclined front wheel angle, and this should give you less understeer. That's camber.
Setup. What we call the setup of the car is how we adjust all of the parts, all of the settings to suit one circuit or another. So the first and most obvious thing we change that you can see from the outside is the wings, the amount of wings we carry on the car. So in Monaco, at a very low speed track, we will have our biggest wings we can to push the car as hard as it can into the racetrack. At our home race in Monza, it's a very high speed track, so we'll have our smallest wings to get the maximum speed at the end of the straight. The things you don't see, we change the springs, we change the cambers, we change all the suspension adjustments to help the car suit the particular track we're working at, and indeed the weather conditions or the track conditions as the grip increases. So that is the job of the race engineers, Rob and Andrea, to give that information to the mechanics who do the work on the car to make it best suit the racetrack.
Okay, the weight distribution of a Formula One car is the amount of weight on the front axle compared to the rear axle. So on a normal car, if we hold it in the middle, it's basically pretty well balanced. So this means it has a 50% weight distribution. The further you move the weight towards the rear wheels, the more the weight distribution is going to the rear. If you only had to accelerate out of a corner, you want to accelerate fast, you move your weight distribution to the rear. So if you only had to go down in a straight line, you would always have the weight right to the back of the car. When you're going around a circuit, unfortunately, you have to come to a corner, which means you actually need to turn in. So you need to have the weight distribution more towards the front, and unfortunately we can't move it during running. So we have the weight distribution around about the centre of the car. Now in Formula One nowadays, in the last few years, there's been a restriction as to where you can put the weight distribution. The idea is to save money. So every team has to fix the weight distribution at 46%. You are then allowed 0.5% either way to balance your car. And the way you do this is by moving the ballast, or you move the suspension. And the cheapest way is to move the ballast. So that's what we use as a setup tool at the track.
Scuderia Ferrari Racing News will be back on Wednesday, September 5th, with a preview of the Monza race and much more.